Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the UK Film Review Podcast. I am your host, Chris Olsen, and joining me on the show this week is no one. No one was available to talk with me about film, so I'm doing this on my own, but that's absolutely fine because what I lack in co-hosts, I more than make up for with some amazing films on offer. So this week we're going to be talking about The Magnificent Seven, or hashtag Mag7 if you follow the marketing for that film. We're also going to be doing a couple of indie shorts, which is Sternenkind and Lookouts. We're also going to be reviewing a feature-length indie film called Miles to Go, so stay tuned for all of that. First up, The Magnificent Seven.
We're decent people being driven from our homes. Slaughtered in cold blood.
So you seek revenge?
I seek righteousness, but I'll take revenge.
Took a job looking for some men to join you. Is it difficult? Impossible.
How many you got so far?
You and me? But we'll need more than a few to help us fight.
Quite a batch of strays.
What could go wrong?
What's the plan?
I've always wanted to blow something up.
How many men, you say?
Okay, so The Magnificent Seven, directed by Antoine Fuqua, starring Denzel Washington, Haley Bennett, Ethan Hawke, Chris Pratt, Peter Sarsgaard, and those other guys. Fantastic cast. Get onto that a little bit later. So the story is very similar to the other two films which have been made before this, that are pretty much the same story. Originally made in the 30s, I believe, a film called Seven Samurai, and then later again in 1960 called The Magnificent Seven. The plot is essentially a small village that comes under attack that then enlists the services of some much better fighters and warriors in order to protect themselves against this outside invading threat. So classic story, and I think that's why it works so well, and that's why it's being retold and being remade. The way that this story has progressed from an Asian setting of swordplay through to a Western genre, and again being remade in the same Western genre but in 2016, it's quite telling, I think, because of the themes of things like heroism, villainism, other themes, greed and violence, war. But there's a lot of differences in this new film that's been made. Yes, there's guns and there's Western settings and very similar kind of things that you would see on especially the 1960s version, that Fuqua brings his own kind of level of gritty realism to this, especially working again with Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke, reminiscent of Training Day when those guys all work together. This has got that kind of harder edge to it, which is really great to see, I must say. It was very compelling throughout. I didn't feel that there was any kind of why am I watching this? Especially once you start seeing some of the subtle differences that are coming in. So I think Fuqua gets more expendable with his characters. They're not kind of, I don't want to give too much away, but it's not the surefire journey that maybe audiences might expect, especially if they've seen the original stories. That's not what's going to happen here for you, which is good. It's good to see that. The themes are very strong. You've got so Ethan Hawke's character, for example, plays this kind of post-traumatic stress disorder suffering soldier who is enlisted by Denzel Washington as part of this group to come in and protect the village. He suffers during one of the initial conflicts this kind of bout of panic and sort of an attack on him that he suddenly can't work out who to fight, what he's shooting at. He's sort of being very nervous and very sort of jittery, and that's something which you would never have seen in the films from the 60s or the 30s, where heroes are very much depicted as the strong characters because of their convictions and their abilities, that were meant to believe that these people were kind of the perfect fighting machines. That adding in this emotional level to a character like that was really interesting, and a fantastic technique done by Fuqua there. I think shout out to Chris Pratt, who maybe most audiences are going to expect him to be the comic relief in this film. Yes, he does have quite a lot of witty rejoinders and funny sort of moments, but his arc is interesting, if a little bit unexplained at times. He tends to bring a little bit more emotional gravitas to his scenes, and you start to realise kind of there's more to him than just being the slapstick Star-Lord out in the West. That's not what this is. He's got more to him. Actually, a lot of the comedy comes from Vincent D'Onofrio's character, who's this violent, outbursty kind of guy who has also got a squeaky voice and tends to flip between very angry and very happy, and it's interesting to see that, especially if anyone's seen him in Daredevil. Like, his character Fisk is really compelling there. Likewise here, it's just, you can't sort of take your eyes off him when he's on screen. I think Denzel Washington's fantastic. He always is. He kind of always delivers on that level. In a film like this, you need that pull. And what was really nice about his characters, they don't reveal too much too quickly. They string that out over a much longer period. So you're really invested in seeing how his journey is going to end up. And similarly with Haley Bennett's character, she's a member of the village, and during the initial skirmish between the village and Peter Sarsgaard's goons who come in, her husband is killed. Not really a spoiler, happens really, really early. So her husband's killed, and then she's the one who goes out and enlists the help of the Mag 7, as they're called. That you think, okay, well, maybe that's just the catalyst for the film. That's just, okay, right, so she's there so that we can bring in these other guys. But no, she actually is quite important. She is pretty badass as well. She's not like a damsel in distress. She really kind of gets stuck in with these guys. She gets a little bit forgotten in the middle section, but then does come back more towards the final third. But great to see that, and I think that there's something really compelling about the end of the film. I'm not going to say what it is, but maybe if people want to know, just drop me a line and I'll let you know my thoughts on that. But yeah, overall, really, really good effort. Great outing from Fuqua. I think he's a really promising, really great director. He's done some great films, and audiences that are, kind of just after the summer. I think that Suicide Squad was all that the film had to offer. This is great to have come out at this time. There is some still great films in the cinema in September, so do go see it. But yeah, that's The Magnificent Seven. Up next, I'm going to be reviewing indie film Miles to Go. Okay, so Miles to Go, directed by Quincy Rose and starring Quincy Rose as the titular character Miles. It's a black comedy drama in which Miles undergoes an existential crisis where he struggles to really get to grips with how he feels about relationships. So he's in his 30s and never really had a strong relationship. They always seem to break down due to his kind of fatalistic feelings on relationships. They're always kind of going to doom, and it just never work out. So after talking a lot with his friends and with a therapist, he decides to revisit one of his relationships with a former ex-girlfriend whom he obviously didn't work out in the past, but maybe blames himself slightly for that. So he decides to go back, try it again with a different attitude, try and look at things in a different way and see if that helps him through. It's an interesting piece. We reviewed it on the website. We also promoted it slightly on some of our channels and stuff. So It was great to really get to grips with this and speak to Quincy about what he was trying to achieve with this film. And it's also a story that really worked as an indie film. I know they had a lot of restrictions in terms of the budget with locations and all that stuff, but you really wouldn't notice. The quality of this film is really high. Great writing, great pace. Every scene is done in a kind of sort of Woody Allen feel. You always feel like there's an aesthetic being chosen that fits it. Nothing's there because, oh, they had limitations, they couldn't afford it. You don't really notice that. The story itself is very interesting. It's kind of like a indie mumblecore sort of film that you've got characters in their 30s sitting around discussing life, talking about where it's going to go and where it's been, talking about also how they feel about stuff and how that's changed the way that they're looking at things now. So it's great to see a film like that in the indie genre that you don't feel like is pretentious, because I think the way that Rose approached the film was to bear all, and literally, like, he's naked in some scenes, and there's also a lot of scenes that are unflattering towards his character, as well as other things that seem kind of boastful and things that are probably make him seem like he's a really intelligent, down-to-earth kind of guy. But there's a lot to him. Everything's bad, and I think that's really important in a movie like this, that it's not just shameless grandstanding. It's trying to get to a truth that we all would connect with, and I think we do. Like, I watched the film and it did leave me pondering, and that's great. It's always nice to leave a viewing and feel like you're still attached to what went on and the themes and the ideas that it threw up. So that was really great to see. The performances are really, really good. I think Quincy is really the sort of mainstay. He's in all of the scenes. The actress who plays his girlfriend is really, really great. She works fantastically opposite him, challenging his ideas, but also not just propping him up. She's a character in her own right, and someone that maybe is also struggling with decisions and thinking about where her life's going. So it's interesting to have that kind of balance to them. On the other side of that, you've got Miles's friend, who is very kind of laddish and a bit brutish with the way that he talks about things, and especially women. This kind of sort of sexual aggression, which maybe gets beaten into people sometimes, probably a poor choice of words there, but yeah, his character is the sort of embodiment of what society would expect from an alpha male. So that was an interesting character to put up alongside Miles and have those two be friends, because there's a complementary nature to their characters, but there's also a lot of contrast there. So that was an interesting dynamic to see play out, but actually quite rewarding, because some of their scenes are quite funny, and there's a lot of moments that seemed sweet when you boiled it down to that it was just two people who didn't really know what to do or how to proceed with their lives. They're not saying they have the perfect way. It's just an interesting dynamic to have a look at. But yeah, overall, a film that aesthetically was really well done. There's some great cinematic shots, especially when they get to the beach. They work really well in terms of capturing not only the urban landscape of where everyone is interacting culturally in society, but also to maybe look at the more ponderous kind of lifestyles that people can lead, the escapism that maybe people are trying to find. I think Miles is a character that suffers greatly from internal strife, that the locations being very kind of set inside his apartment or someone else's apartment is where a lot of that anxiety is allowed to brew. And then you've got other scenes that may be more outdoors where he feels more relaxed. It's just an interesting dynamic. I'm not sure if that was on purpose, but something that I kind of picked up on. But yeah, if you can see Miles to Go, do go seek it out. I believe it's on a lot of streaming services. I think it is coming onto DVD at some point. But I think Quincy Rose is a director to maybe look out for we're going to be hopefully reviewing another film of his in the coming months. So yeah, come back for that. And on that note, we're going to review a short film next called Sternenkind. Okay, so Sternenkind, directed by Daniel Mikolas, starring Friederike Hammer and Niels Wiegand, is a compelling emotional drama about a couple suffering through a traumatic time when they're told that their fetus won't come to term and that the pregnancy will not be able to go ahead. They suffer this intense trauma to their relationship and decide to escape from their city living and go to the countryside, where hopefully they're able to move past this, get some kind of recovery from what they've been told, and just really get to grips with how they can move forward from this really sort of horrific situation. It's a powerful film, and it's done through lots of different ways to communicate this heavy gravitas to the audience. So one of which is through colour. So the opening scenes and the end scenes are done in colour, whereas the middle section where they are out in this different location is in black and white. So it's an interesting visual choice, quite bold, quite daring. I think that audiences will enjoy it. I don't think it's done to kind of be all visual and arty just for the sake of it. It's there because it's telling something specific about what's going on and relates to the emotion of the characters. So it's a good choice. I think it works really, really well. Another way which these characters are obviously distancing themselves from the situation by moving to a different location. It's very different to where they receive the news. The audience is going with them through this moment in their relationship. They're able to be there as the threads start to come apart between the two performers, the two characters, both of whom are fantastic, by the way. Some great deliveries, and also just physicalities to the way that they interact with each other. It's really interesting to watch, so I do thoroughly recommend this film. I think there was a really great scene that audiences would enjoy where Hammer goes out into the field and she just kind of bears all her grief. She just screams, and I think the anguish of that moment, and I think the build up to it are just enough to watch this film anyway. Yeah, if you're looking for something that's going to move you and you're going to really be able to sink your teeth into, it's definitely that film. There's a lot to enjoy about it. There's a lot of filmmaking that's going on that's kind of just all complementing this emotional journey, as well as just a lot of afterthought as well. So I left the film and I was thinking about it for several days. I wrote the review, thinking about it for a little bit longer, and it's every now and then it's a film that I come across through being on the site a lot. Anyway, I revisit, and it's a great film to look at. So it'd be interesting to see what the performers do in other movies, because they're fantastic, but also Niels Wiegand, just to see what he kind of does, and if there's anything that he's going to turn his attention to with this kind of emotional storyline that's going to be able to really get into a subject matter in a way that's not just about telling the story through dialogue. It's about complementing it with every part of the aesthetic. So the score as well is really kind of harrowing. There's a lot of cuts that seem at first subtle, and then they're slightly sharper. The whole thing just puts you on edge in a way that is tough. It's tough to watch, but like a lot of films that do that, if you can stick with it and get into it, it's really, really worthwhile. So it's a firm recommendation from me, so much so that I've lost the ability to speak. It's fantastic. Check it out if you can find it. I'll try and chuck a link up on the website or in the comments below. So yeah, Sternenkind, check it out. So, short film Lookout, directed by David Bosquet, starring Kelton Roney, Chris Cleveland, and Stephanie Estes. It's a fantasy short film with incredibly high production values, The visual effects on this film are immense. It literally looks like a Tolkien kind of Peter Jackson film. It's so strong. It's got a fantastic level of filmmaking going on, right from the costumes to the sound. We interviewed Pablo Crossier, who does the composing for the film, and he had some really interesting things to say about filmmaking. So check out the interview online. But also just his input for this film just adds to the fantastic aesthetic that's going on. It's so world building. Everything about it is just really impressive. The performances are brilliant. Roni is the star lead role of this child who essentially is part of a village who are surrounded by this kind of dark forests and lots of magical creatures that live in there, things that go bump in the night kind of thing, and one of which is a basilisk. So this basilisk kind of preys on the town, so they have to have these rangers and scouts who kind of stand guard, really, and Roni's character is almost ready to become a ranger, but as that moment kind of approaches, he starts to question whether he can actually do this. His mother, played by Estes, is kind of trying to console him and let him know how brave he's being and things like that. But it's a really kind of coming of age moment, but set in this fantasy world where everything is dark and creepy and really quite nightmarish. So it's an interesting way to do that storyline. Chris Cleveland, who plays the ranger, who's teaching Roni and trying to get him over into the next stage. The interaction between those two characters is really great on screen. There's a nice dynamic. It works really well. It's a kind of film that if you enjoy the genre, if you like fantasy films and you enjoy The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, even some of the sort of throwback 80s kind of fantasy films like Neverending Story, it just has that feel to it, which is immersive. Everything about it is absorbing. You can just sit in this world. You don't really get any touch points that feel like, oh, that's our world and that's reality coming in there. Everything is done in a way that is perfectly pitched and creative. It's the kind of film I think that people should seek out and enjoy. I wanted more from it, I must say. I felt like it was the beginning of a story. It was like a prologue. Be interesting to see what else is done, because it's based on a penny arcade story. So there could be a lot of things that spin off from this. Maybe we'll get a feature, and there is obviously a market for fantasy trilogies. They've been very popular with audiences, so definitely one to check out. I think there's a link to it on the site at the moment, and we'll make sure that you can view that. So that's Lookouts, and look out for it. I can't believe I did that. And yeah, that's the end of the show. I'm going to be at Raindance over the next couple of weeks. I know that a couple of the writers are going to be there as well, so we're going to be trying to cover as much of that as possible. Probably do another podcast after that, so do come back and check that out. In the meantime, drop us a line, let us know what you liked, what you didn't like, and take care.